Tonight on NewsWatch, new revelations on NSA spying, what they could mean as the president plans to announce reform in the agency.
Plus, speaking out against abortion, the Supreme Court hears arguments on bubble zones around clinics.
And see what's being done to bring hope and help to Egypt's suffering children. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Who should oversee the surveillance activities of the National Security Agency? Good evening. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. A presidential task force weighed in on the issue during Capitol Hill testimony this week. That as President Obama is preparing to address NSA reform Friday in a major speech.
Meanwhile, there are new revelations today about agency monitoring around the world. As John Waggy explains in tonight's top story, they're providing even more fuel for NSA critics.
The NSA was already in trouble here at home for requesting phone companies to collect millions of records of private citizens. The president may leave the decision on what to do about it to Congress.
They have concluded this phone record program is not uniquely valuable enough to justify a massive intrusion on Americans' privacy.
Now the New York Times reports the NSA uses secret technology to monitor thousands of foreign computers, including some belonging to the Russian military, drug cartels, trade groups in the European Union, and even U.S. partners such as Saudi Arabia, India, and Pakistan. That may create more trouble overseas, but it's the revelations made by Edward Snowden, especially about the data collection on Americans, that forced the appointment of a group to look into possible NSA abuses of Section 215 of the Patriot Act.
Our judgment about the government holding the data is that the primary danger of the 215 telephony metadata program is not if it is used only in the way in which its use is authorized, but that it leaves sitting out there a huge amount of information, personal information about Americans that could be abused in awful ways.
We've seen this movie before. We know how it ends. We know that eventually, if that much information remains in the hands of government for that long, it will eventually be abused. It will be manipulated for partisan and otherwise nefarious purposes, and we can't let that happen.
The Review Commission told the Senate committee that the secret FISA court overseeing NSA activities should not be making decisions on law or policy without an opposition voice.
Sunlight is the best of disinfectants, as Justice Brandeis said, and that it's very important for the American people, unless there's a very strong national security justification on the other side, to get a sense of what their government is doing.
All three branches of government are likely to be involved in the future battle between protecting privacy and safeguarding Americans, especially against terrorism. After the president's speech Friday, the main burden may fall on Congress, the branch closest to the people. John Waggy, CBN News.
Judges on the secret FISA court strongly oppose any reforms on transparency. In a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee, the judges slammed the proposal from the Review Commission as unnecessary and counterproductive. They claim it will create burdens on the court's workload.
Seton Motley is the president of Less Government, and he joins us now via Skype with more. Seton, how damaging to the U.S. is the revelation that the NSA has planted spying software in computers in other countries?
I think it's damaging. I think we need to do some of these things, and we don't need the world knowing we're doing these things. I'm assuming this is yet another revelation from the Edward Snowden oeuvre, but we need to do some of these things, and the world doesn't need to know about it. So it hurts us a great deal that this has been revealed.
So what do you expect to come out of the president's speech on Friday?
Not much. It's going to be one of those typical Obama speeches where he takes 20 minutes to say nothing. He's not going to. He wants to, for some reason, continue to collect data on hundreds of millions of innocent Americans and somehow extend constitutional rights to non-citizens, which, of course, is right in line with his wanting to extend constitutional rights to Gitmo detainees, et cetera, et cetera. He wants to eviscerate constitutional rights for people who are supposed to have them and extend them to people who don't. But as far as reining in what the NSA has been doing domestically, I don't expect a whole lot out of President Obama on Friday.
Seaton, both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate are speaking out against the intrusiveness of the NSA's monitoring. What does that tell you?
Well, I think I think it tells you that one, we're approaching an election, and two, hand in glove with that is the American people don't like what the NSA is doing domestically. I think they understand the necessity of it internationally. They don't see how it's correct and constitutional to do it domestically and to do it in such a broad, the Fourth Amendment says unreasonable search and seizure. And I think it's hard to say that collecting data on hundreds of millions of Americans is reasonable. So I think the fact that you're seeing bipartisan opposition to what the NSA and under the Obama administration is doing just tells you that it's resonating with people what's going on.
And quickly, is there any evidence that this level of surveillance has actually done anything to keep Americans safer?
No, they keep saying it is, but then when asked for specifics, they cannot provide it. No, the Russians handed us the Tsarnaev brothers in Boston on a silver platter. We didn't do anything with that. We have Nidal Hassan in Fort Hood, Texas, who had "Soldier of Allah" on his card, and we couldn't do anything with that. So there's no evidence that this blanket surveillance of the American people is helping at all. No.
All right. Seaton Motley of Less Government. Thank you, Seaton, once again for your insights.
Thank you very much, sir.
That deadly attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, could have been prevented. That's the finding of a Senate Intelligence Committee. In a just-released report, the committee blames the State Department and security agencies for not preventing the 2012 attack that killed 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador seen there. The bipartisan report says despite warnings of terrorist activity, the U.S. did not increase security at the American outpost, and analysts inaccurately cited protests as the reason for that attack. The Senate committee is making 18 recommendations to improve security at other diplomatic and intelligence posts overseas.
The Supreme Court today heard arguments over abortion clinic bubble zones. Those are the areas some states set up preventing pro-life advocates from speaking out against abortion near a clinic. The High Court is trying to determine if the zones are legal. As Paul Strand reports, it's a case that pits the free speech right of Americans against a woman's so-called right to an abortion.
Massachusetts set up 35-foot bubble zones around the entrances and exits to its abortion clinics in 2007 after a few episodes of violence, even murder of clinic workers, and angry confrontations.
There were large groups of people standing shoulder to shoulder in our doorway, usually screaming at full volume, not quiet counseling, trying to prevent our patients and staff from coming into the health center.
Wall says she herself experienced this up close.
With someone inches away from my face, screaming at me at full volume in the entranceway to the Planned Parenthood Health Center.
Pro-choicers say this bubble zone law is needed to protect pregnant women from harassment. But pro-lifers say it's preventing them from saving unborn babies whose mothers might change their mind about an abortion if they just heard a gentle and quiet word. And that's what pro-life sidewalk counselors like Eleanor McCullen say they can no longer do. Quiet counseling that talks women out of abortions.
Mrs. McCullen and others have been greatly hindered in their ministry. They've had hundreds of saves in the past, and that's dwindled to next to nothing. So this is a real-world unconstitutional law that is claiming real lives.
McCullen and others sued over the Massachusetts law. She told CBN News she doesn't harass women but helps them, and she's found most women don't really want to get an abortion. They just can't see a way out until someone like her comes along.
They want to talk to somebody, but if I miss them, I have to stop at the line. That's what is infuriating. Just losing one baby is one too many, especially when it's by abortion. 1/4 of our young people are missing.
The court has upheld the bubble zone law in the past, but a number of justices in their questioning seem opposed to this Massachusetts law. The fate of similar buffer zone laws all around the country now hangs in the balance. Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
The Republican-led House is set to approve that $1.1 trillion spending deal. That's without the votes of some conservatives who object to the Affordable Care Act funding found in the measure. The bipartisan omnibus bill provides an additional $20 billion for defense and domestic programs and funds the government through September. The Senate is expected to approve the legislation before the end of the week.
The United States will send $380 million additional dollars in humanitarian aid to Syria. Secretary of State John Kerry says the money will go to help civilians who are suffering. The U.S. pledge came during the United Nations International Humanitarian Conference and was one of many from around the globe. Kuwait says it will send $500 million in aid. Saudi Arabia, $250 million. And the United Kingdom is pledging over $160 million. The head of the UN says Syria needs a total of $6.5 billion to care for refugees and civilians.
Coming up, CBN News enters the world of preppers to show you why some are stocking up on supplies. CBN's Operation Blessing is working to bring relief to those still being affected by that water crisis in West Virginia. Last week, a chemical spill contaminated the water supply for over 300,000 residents, leaving them without water for drinking, showering, cooking, or even washing their hands. Operation Blessing has partnered with a local union mission, providing bottled water, shower trailers, diapers, and other relief supplies.
This is wonderful. This is nothing but a blessing.
They've really treated me wonderful here. They've given me paper towels and plates and water and any kind of assistance I need.
I had to evacuate my two oldest children because my oldest son has asthma. If we didn't have this, it'd be horrible. These people are a blessing and they have no idea.
Oh, so nice to see OB there in my home state and home city. Today, OB distributed over 75,000 bottles of water. West Virginia's water supply has been restored to about half of the affected customers.
The events in West Virginia have many wondering how they would handle a similar situation. Whether it's a natural disaster, a crippling economic crisis, or even a long-term power outage, there is one group that's always prepared. They're called preppers, and they're growing in number. Chuck Holton reports.
We can have an economic collapse. We can have terrorist attacks. We can have social unrest, a natural disaster, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes.
Keith Eiton is a diehard prepper and recently started a business helping others get ready too.
The biggest problem we suffer here in North America is complacency. People figure since, nothing has happened in X amount of years, nothing bad will ever happen.
You know, survivalists are sometimes portrayed as these wild-eyed crazies waiting for the zombie apocalypse. But with the state of the economy and in today's world, being prepared is more popular than ever. In the mountains of North Carolina, a couple thousand people got together at the Carolina Readiness Seminar to discuss the risks and find out what they can do about them.
It's very environmental, very green, takes us off of fossil fuels, and very easy to do.
Joel Henderson is the co-owner of Green Gold Filters, one of the vendors at the Prepper Convention. His patented filtration system is helping folks accomplish something that America has been trying to do for years: run a vehicle without foreign oil.
If anybody has a diesel engine, diesel truck, tractor, generator, you can use used cooking oil as an alternative diesel fuel or motor oil. If you go to the restaurants, this right here is a local restaurant here in Asheville, Indian restaurant. This is their used cooking oil that they were throwing away. We went and picked it up, ran it through our filter system, and now we have a nice alternative diesel fuel that I'll put right in my tank.
This movement is being helped along by a new trend in television shows about the subject. The most popular is National Geographic's Doomsday Preppers.
Doomsday Preppers is the highest rated show right now ever on National Geographic. It's a show about your average American family, unique people that are prepping for any of life's uncertainties, whether that be an economic collapse to a solar flare. No matter what it is, they're going to be prepared.
One of the challenges for the show is that most preppers aren't eager to advertise their stockpiles of supplies, since if the bottom drops out, looting could be a real problem.
We do understand that, it could be a risk to people, but we do respect people's privacy on the show. We don't have to say your first name or last name. We don't have to say where you're from. And we try to get in the lives of many diverse preppers and have each prepper, give a takeaway to our viewers so they can learn more about prepping.
But Keith Eiton says the first step to being prepared has nothing to do with canned food or bottled water.
Your first thing in preparedness, for me personally, is your relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the very first thing. If you build a solid relationship with Jesus Christ, then after that, if you can get food, water stored away, a little safe retreat, things of that nature, it'll all fall into place. You want to be able to feed yourself,
feed your family, help a neighbor, help a friend.
You know, 100 years ago, it wasn't strange for a family to have a basement full of food, but that's changed. Most Americans today have less than 3 days' supply of food stored up, and many have no emergency supplies or even a first aid kit. But you know, with the infrastructure of America getting more and more fragile every day, maybe it's not a bad idea to stock up, just in case. From an undisclosed location in North Carolina, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Chuck, we're coming to your house, just so you know. Up next, how one group is still working to bring aid to the orphans of the Arab Spring. The past 2 days, voters in Egypt have been deciding the fate of the country's next constitution. And as people have headed to the polls, violence has broken out there.
It's just the latest sign radical Islam remains a threat in Egypt. Attacks by Muslim Brotherhood supporters there have hit Coptic Christians especially hard, including widows and orphans.
In tonight's Focus report, Gary Lane explains how one group of these outcasts is surviving with help from American and Egyptian Christians.
The situation, of course, is getting worse. There's a lot of insecurities, instability that's happening in Egypt. It's the weakest and the most vulnerable that suffer the most.
25% of all Egyptians live at or below the poverty level, earning less than $2 per day. Many of them are widows. An estimated 1.7 million Egyptian children are orphans. Nermeen Riyad is the founder of Coptic Orphans, a Washington-based group that reaches out to Egyptian widows and their children.
Once a father passes away, you have nothing. The first step, of course, the children are pulled out of school. You can't afford to send them to school. They become then the child labor, they become the child brides, they become those that are abused, and they grow to perpetuate this poverty.
The widows and orphans are treated as social outcasts. Unlike Americans, Egyptians have no unemployment or Social Security. 31-year-old Naima Wahib's husband, George, died from stomach cancer 4 years ago. She and her 2 children have struggled ever since. They live in a small one-room apartment near the city of Luxor. Saneh, a Christian volunteer, regularly visits Naima and her children.
If Christian children here in Upper Egypt are to have a brighter future, they need an education. 11-year-old Antonio here could barely read late last year, but after 15 sessions with a volunteer from Coptic Orphans, he now can read Bible stories. Go ahead, Antonio.
We started out with just sending money to the children. Then we realized, wait a minute, to really help them, to get them on their feet, we need to focus on education.
A Christian tutor helped 16-year-old Kyrillos get better grades in school. Last year, the school ranked him number 2 in his freshman class. His father, a tailor, died at the age of 38. Today, his sewing machine sits idle in this bedroom. Kyrillos' mother learned skills of her own, but had no money to get started. Caring Christians provided her with the seed money to operate a small hair salon in her home.
Before, I had no social life. I was afraid to go out in public. I didn't have much self-esteem. I talk to people now. I'm a totally different person. I thank God this salon is providing food and clothing, everything we need. At the end of the day, it's the Lord who is providing for us.
15-year-old Ayman was only 3 years old when his father died from intestinal bleeding. American Christians donated money to pay his school fees so he could remain in school. They also paid for his mother Faiza's heart surgery. She now does some small sewing jobs to help provide for her family. They live in several rooms of this house, but the landlord wants them to leave. Ayman takes volunteer Sanaa on a tour of the house that Coptic Orphans is building for his family.
Their help has made a big difference. The children would not have been able to continue with school. They are now doing well in their classes. I'm so thankful and grateful to God for the help they've given us.
Ayman, Kyrillos, Antonio, and their siblings now have a brighter future because of the help of caring American and Egyptian Christians. Unfortunately, the rise of the Islamists may cause greater persecution against non-Muslims. That may lead to more widows and orphans in the days ahead. Riyadh says many Christians are ready for the next wave of persecution.
Many of the Christians have told me, I'm willing to die for Christ. Literally, and they will be put in such a situation. We want to be more and more ready to prepare and to support and to make the Christians in Egypt stronger and stronger. Actually, Christ gives us an offer to work beside him. And to me, that I think it's the greatest honor.
Gary Lane, CBN News, Luxor, Egypt.
Up next, how one community is helping a couple in need have the wedding of their dreams.
After receiving some devastating news, one Massachusetts couple will be getting married sooner than expected.
All thanks to their generous community. Eric and Jennifer were planning their summer wedding. Then Eric was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and given 6 months to a year to live. With limited time and medical bills piling up, the couple decided on a quick City Hall wedding.
I just decided to cancel it because basically when you're given 6 months to a year to live, that kind of was like 8 months down the road, and yeah. I wasn't waiting.
We wanted to make sure we got married. We'd been looking for each other our whole lives. Now that I found her, I'm not going to let her go.
Wow, it's true love. When their community got word of the plan, they decided to step in. Local vendors are giving the couple their dream wedding. The venue, the dress, the cake, the DJ, everything at no cost. The big day is January 24th. Say a prayer for Eric.
Oh, indeed. He needs a miracle.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, that's a great love that they have, though.
It is.
God bless them. Well, that's going to do it for this edition on NewsWatch.
Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. Hope you'll join us next time.
Good night.